my record as president, my leadership in the world, my vision for America's future, all merited a second term. But nothing can come in the way of saving our democracy. That includes personal ambition.
President Biden telling the nation this week he is stepping aside as his party's nominee for president. While he did not tell the nation why, the reasons are obvious, as concerns have only grown over his declining cognitive ability. He made clear he was not stepping down as president. With 6 months before a new administration can take place and global volatility at historic levels, many are questioning whether or not his remaining in office creates greater instability and national security risk for the U.S. The chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Texas Congressman Michael McCaul, joins me now. Mr. Chairman, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks for having me.
Well, I can think of just a few people who have their finger on the pulse internationally like you do. Is there reason for concern?
I think there's been a reason for concern since day one. I have to say, I'm a Reagan Republican. He projected strength. That brings peace. President Biden on day one has projected weakness. And when you do that, Tony, you get what we have today, and that is two hot wars in a hot zone. The Middle East is on fire. Eastern Europe with Ukraine and Putin's invasion, and China threatening Taiwan and the South Pacific. I've never seen it quite this dangerous. And you throw an open border on top of that, that's a recipe for disaster. In fact, we have now already seen accounts of ISIS getting in to the United States through the southern border, something that when I was chairman of Homeland, I never thought I would see, and we always worried about that. But to your point, where he is today, I personally saw a rapid decline in his cognitive ability in my meetings in the White House, and it concerned me in terms of what message does that send to our adversaries. And I think that debate, the emperor had no clothes, so to speak, because that's when the entire world saw that our commander-in-chief is failing in his cognitive abilities. When our adversaries see that, Tony, that only emboldens and empowers them to get even more aggressive. And I think that's what you're going to see. Now, the remedy is put forth in the Constitution. The 25th Amendment provides for this, but that has to be exercised by the cabinet and the vice president, not by Congress.
Chairman McCaul, I want to go to one of those adversaries. It was made very evident this week on the floor of the House when Prime Minister Netanyahu spoke. I was in the chamber for that speech. I was in the chamber, as you were, for his speech back in 2015 when he also warned of Iran. It appears that those warnings are growing as he is pointing out that very clearly that Israel is what's standing between Iran and us, that we are really the target of Iran. Is he right?
Yeah, I thought that was one of the best points he made in a very powerful speech that he always gives. He's a friend of mine. I've known him for quite some time. He's a very strong-willed person. And every time I've met him, he says that Iran is the head of the snake. And the tentacles, if you will, are the proxies of Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthi rebels. And what he essentially said, Tony, as you point out, is that I'm fighting for you. I'm fighting the proxies of Iran so you don't have to. Because at the end of the day, Israel is the little Satan in Iran's eyes, but the United States is the great Satan. And there will come a day when we are going to have to deal with Iran one way or the other as they approach complete enrichment in their uranium process, so they will be able to build an atomic weapon. They already have missiles that can reach Israel and far beyond that in the region. If they can put a nuclear warhead on that, imagine the threat that would come out of Iran. I passed a measure out of my committee, Foreign Affairs Committee, saying that a nuclear Iran is not acceptable. And in diplomatic speak, that means that we will not accept the nuclear Iran. That means that we will do everything within our power to ensure that doesn't happen, including, if we have to, taking that out. I know Israel would go alone. I don't think they should do that. I think we should be with Israel. And I think our allies that we have garnered, I think, quite well with our NATO allies, should be all part of this to make the world a safer place.
Mr. Chairman, let me read a quote from his speech on the floor this past Wednesday. He said, and one more thing. When Israel acts to prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons that could destroy Israel and threaten every American city, every city that you come from, we're not only protecting ourselves, we're protecting you. Should we be reading something into that statement as to Israel on the edge of dealing with Iran?
And you're very perceptive to be able to read between the lines on this. I can interpret that just given my experience, but for the average person out there, what he's saying is Iran's on the cusp of having fully enriched uranium sufficient enough to develop a nuclear warhead, and they can buy a warhead from China or North Korea, and overnight could have that capability. We're monitoring the situation very closely. Because when they get to that point, we're going to have to respond in one way or the other. And we don't want Israel to do that alone. I don't think that is right optics. They are also building what we call ICBMs, which are intercontinental ballistic missiles. Those missiles will be able to reach the United States of America. Now, they're not there quite yet, but they are developing them. The current missiles they have are sufficient to hit anywhere in the Middle East. This is why Saudi Arabia, their antenna is quite up right now. And my great hope, Tony, is when this conflict is over in Gaza, and I hope it's over soon, then we move into the normalization process. What do I mean by that? That means a security agreement between the United States, Israel, and Saudi Arabia, the likes of which we never thought would happen in our lifetimes, and would be a complete game changer where all the other Arab Muslim nations would follow Saudi. And it gives us a window of opportunity to possibly achieve true peace in the Middle East.
Right.
It's something, quite frankly, Tony, that I don't think we thought would happen in our lifetime.
Yeah, it is a powerful moment. Mr. Chairman, we're up against a break. I want to thank you for joining us. As always, very perceptive and grateful for the conversation.
Thanks so much for having me. I look forward to coming back.